Most people believe the future arrives suddenly, as a moment, a breakthrough, a collapse, a turning point that announces itself loudly. But the future rarely arrives that way. It is usually built quietly, patiently, and invisibly, long before you notice the consequences. It is built in the inner conversations you repeat when no one else is present, in the emotions you allow to settle into habits, in the thoughts you never question because they feel familiar. Over time, familiarity becomes comfort, and comfort becomes identity. This is how people wake up years later, living lives they never consciously chose. Many young adults today feel overwhelmed, not because they are weak, but because their inner world has never been taught how to rest. The mind is constantly stimulated, constantly pulled outward, constantly reacting. There is little space to digest experience, little silence to understand emotion, little patience to sit with discomforts. So people keep moving, scrolling, chasing, distracting themselves, hoping clarity will appear on its own. But clarity does not arrive through noise. Purpose does not emerge from constant motion. Stability does not grow in an unmanaged inner environment. When the mind is left unattended, it does not become free. It becomes conditioned. It repeats what it has absorbed, often without asking whether it is true or helpful. This is why so many people feel disconnected even while surrounded by information. Why relationships feel fragile. Why motivation comes and goes. Why anxiety feels like a background hum that never fully disappears. The mind has been busy designing a future, but no one has been guiding the design. The work is not to control life. It is to understand yourself deeply enough that life stops controlling you. When you learn how your thoughts form, how emotions move through you, how attention shapes perception, something subtle but powerful changes. You stop reacting to life and begin responding to it. This is not a path of intensity. It is a path of steadiness, of discipline without harshness, of awareness without judgment, of responsibility without shame. When you take ownership of your inner life, the future stops feeling threatening. It becomes something you participate in consciously. Your mind is quietly designing your future every day. The question is not whether this is happening. The question is whether you are awake enough to guide it. Your mind is quietly designing your future long before events give it a name, not through dramatic decisions, but through repeated inner patterns that feel ordinary and harmless. A thought you return to when you feel uncertain, an emotion you indulge when you feel tired, a story you tell yourself about who you are and what is possible. These patterns do not shout, they whisper, and because they whisper, they are rarely challenged. Awareness is the first interruption of this process. When you become aware of what is happening inside you, you create distance. That distance is not separation from life. It is intimacy with truth. You begin to see your thoughts not as commands, but as suggestions. You notice emotions without immediately turning them into actions. This moment of seeing is where destiny begins to loosen its grip. Without awareness, the mind operates on habit. It repeats what it knows, not what serves you. If fear has been rehearsed, fear will lead. If doubt has been nurtured, doubt will speak first. Awareness does not judge these patterns. It simply observes them clearly. And what is observed with clarity begins to change naturally. As awareness deepens, emotional discipline becomes possible. Discipline here does not mean control or suppression. It means responsibility. The ability to feel fully without becoming overwhelmed. The strength to sit with discomfort without escaping it through distraction, conflict, or self-destruction. When emotions are not understood, they harden into behavior. When they are met calmly, they soften and pass. Daily reality is shaped not by what you feel, but by how you relate to what you feel. Two people can experience the same emotion and live completely different lives because one is ruled by it and the other listens to it without surrendering their direction. Emotional maturity is quiet. It is felt in restraint, in patience, in the ability to pause before responding. Your attention then becomes the most valuable resource you possess. Wherever attention goes repeatedly, identity follows. If your attention lives in comparison, your future will feel inadequate. If it lives in resentment, your future will feel heavy. If it lives in fear, your future will feel small. Attention trains the nervous system. It teaches the body what kind of world it lives in. Most people do not realize how fragmented their attention has become. They feel restless without stimulation, uncomfortable in silence, pulled in many directions but rooted in none. Training attention is not about force. It is about returning again and again to what is real, to the present moment, to the breath, to the task in front of you. This returning builds strength. As attention stabilizes, inner order begins to form. Thoughts become clearer, decisions become simpler, values stop shifting based on approval or pressure. Inner order is not perfection, it is alignment. When your inner world is aligned, the outer world becomes easier to navigate, even when it remains uncertain. People often seek stability through control of circumstances. But circumstances change. Inner order remains. When you know what you stand for, what you will tolerate, and what you will not abandon within yourself, life becomes less confusing. You stop negotiating your self-respect for comfort. This naturally leads to responsibility. Responsibility is often misunderstood as burden, but it is actually the return of power. When you accept responsibility for your inner life, you stop waiting for others to change before you feel at peace. You stop blaming the past for every present limitation. You acknowledge what is within your influence and act there. Responsibility builds trust with yourself. Each time you act in alignment with your values, even quietly, confidence grows. Not the loud confidence that seeks validation, but the grounded confidence that comes from integrity. This confidence is steady. It does not depend on praise or recognition. Finally, silence becomes a teacher. Not the absence of sound, but the absence of unnecessary noise. In silence, the mind settles, the body relaxes. Intuition becomes audible. Direction emerges not as urgency, but as knowing. Silence does not rush you, it clarifies you. In silence, you recognize what paths drain you and which ones strengthen you. You sense when something is misaligned long before it collapses. This is not mystical, it is the natural intelligence of a mind that has been given space to function properly. Your future will not be shaped by force. It will be shaped by awareness, discipline, attention, order, responsibility, and silence. Quietly, patiently, every day, emotional discipline shapes daily reality in ways most people never stop to examine. Not because emotions are unimportant, but because they are powerful. And anything powerful, when left unmanaged, begins to rule instead of serve. Most people believe their emotions are reactions to life. In truth, emotions are reactions to interpretation. Two people can experience the same event and feel entirely different things. Not because the event changed, but because the inner lens through which it was filtered was different. This is why emotional discipline is not about changing the world. It is about understanding how the world is processed inside you. When emotions are not met with awareness, they quietly take control. Irritation becomes a tone of voice. Insecurity becomes withdrawal or overcompensation. Loneliness becomes attachment or avoidance. These behaviors seem small in isolation, but repeated daily, they shape relationships, opportunities, and self-image. Over time, people begin to believe that life itself is heavy, when in reality, it is their emotional habits that are exhausting them. Emotional discipline begins with permission to feel without judgment. Many people rush to fix, explain, or suppress what they feel because they are afraid emotions will overwhelm them. But emotions do not overwhelm because they are They overwhelm because they are resisted or indulged without understanding. When an emotion is allowed to be felt fully and calmly, it reveals its message and then begins to release. This requires patience, the kind of patience that does not demand immediate relief. When sadness arises, you sit with it instead of numbing it. When anger appears, you observe it instead of acting on it. When fear surfaces, you breathe and remain present rather than escaping into distraction. This is not weakness, this is strength that is invisible to the outside world. Through this practice, something subtle changes. You begin to trust yourself. You realize that emotions can move through you without destroying you. This trust becomes a foundation for emotional stability. You stop fearing your inner world, and because of that, it begins to calm itself. Daily life is filled with emotional triggers, conversations that touch old wounds, situations that challenge identity, moments that stir insecurity or disappointment. Emotional discipline does not remove these triggers. It changes how long they stay and how deeply they shape behavior. Instead of hours of rumination, there are minutes of reflection. Instead of impulsive reactions, there are measured responses. This shift alters relationships profoundly. When you are no longer ruled by emotional surges, you listen more clearly. You speak with intention instead of reaction. You stop asking others to regulate emotions you have not yet learned to hold yourself. This creates safety, both for you and for those around you. Emotional discipline also affects how you experience yourself when no one else is present. The inner dialogue softens. The constant self-criticism loses volume. You begin to relate to yourself with firmness and compassion at the same time. You correct without punishing. You acknowledge mistakes without collapsing into shame. Over time, daily reality begins to feel lighter, not because problems disappear, but because you are no longer adding unnecessary weight through unmanaged emotion. You move through the day with steadiness. You respond instead of react. You recover faster when things go wrong. This is how emotional discipline shapes the future quietly, not through dramatic breakthroughs, but through daily emotional hygiene, through moments of restraint, through choosing presence over escape, through learning that feelings are teachers, not rulers. When emotions are disciplined, they stop clouding perception. You see situations more accurately. You make decisions from clarity instead of urgency. You become someone whose inner state is not easily hijacked by circumstances. This steadiness is felt. It influences work, relationships, and self-respect. And once emotional discipline takes root, it naturally leads into something even more foundational, the understanding that attention itself is shaping who you are becoming, moment by moment. Attention is the currency of your life, and most people spend it without realizing how limited it is. You wake up each day with a finite amount of mental energy, emotional capacity, and presence. Where this attention goes repeatedly becomes the landscape of your inner world, and the inner world, over time, becomes the outer life. Many people believe they lack motivation, clarity, or purpose. Often, what they lack is not desire but directed attention. Their focus is fragmented, constantly pulled in different directions by noise, urgency, comparison, and stimulation. The mind becomes busy but not clear, active but not intentional. When attention is scattered, even simple decisions feel heavy. Attention shapes perception. What you consistently focus on grows larger in your experience. If your attention returns again and again to fear, the world begins to feel threatening. If it returns to lack, life feels insufficient. If it returns to comparison, the sense of self weakens. This is not because the world is actually this way, but because attention trains the nervous system to expect certain realities. Most people do not realize how much of their attention is consumed unconsciously. The habit of checking, the pull toward outrage or entertainment, the constant background noise of opinions that are not their own. Over time, this erodes the ability to stay with one thing long enough for depth to emerge. Shallow attention creates shallow satisfaction, no matter how intense the stimulus. Training attention is an act of quiet discipline, not forcing the mind to obey, but teaching it where to return, again and again, to the present moment, to the body, to the task at hand. Each return strengthens focus, just as each repetition strengthens a muscle. At first, the mind resists. It wanders. It seeks novelty. This is normal. What matters is the return, not the wandering. As attention stabilizes, clarity begins to surface. Thoughts become less chaotic. Emotions are noticed earlier before they escalate. Decisions feel less urgent and more grounded. You begin to experience life directly, rather than through constant mental commentary. Why? This directness brings calm. Attention also determines the quality of relationships. When your attention is divided, people feel it. Conversations become thin, listening becomes partial, presence fades. But when attention is full, even silence becomes meaningful. Others feel seen, you feel connected. This kind of presence cannot be faked. It comes from a trained inner life. When attention is respected, time feels different. You stop rushing without knowing why. You move with intention instead of urgency. The nervous system settles because it is no longer constantly scanning for stimulation or threat. This settling creates space for insight. Purpose does not arrive through constant searching. It emerges when attention is stable enough to recognize what already resonates. When you stop flooding the mind with noise, you begin to notice what draws you naturally, what feels aligned, what sustains energy instead of draining it. A future shaped by trained attention is not dramatic, it is coherent. Each day builds upon the last. Effort compounds. Direction becomes clear, not because answers are forced, but because distractions lose their grip. When attention becomes steady, it prepares the ground for inner order. The mind stops pulling in every direction and begins to organize itself naturally around what matters most. Inner order creates outer stability, and this truth becomes visible only after attention has learned how to settle. When the mind is constantly pulled outward, inner life remains fragmented. Thoughts compete, emotions overlap, values shift depending on pressure or approval. In this state, even small challenges feel overwhelming because there is no internal structure holding experience together. Inner order does not arrive through force. It develops through consistency, through returning to what matters even when it is inconvenient, through noticing when your actions no longer align with your values and gently correcting course. This process is quiet, no one applauds it, but over time it creates a deep sense of reliability within yourself. Many people try to organize their external lives first. They change environments, routines, relationships, hoping that stability will follow. Sometimes it helps temporarily. But if the inner world remains disordered, external stability never lasts. Anxiety returns, confusion resurfaces, dissatisfaction finds a new reason to appear. Inner order is the foundation that allows outer structure to stand. Order begins with clarity, knowing what you value and what you are no longer willing to sacrifice, knowing when to say no even if it costs approval, knowing when to rest and when to apply discipline. This clarity does not make life rigid, it makes life honest. When inner order strengthens, decision-making becomes simpler. You stop overthinking every choice because your internal compass is clear. You feel when something is misaligned long before it turns into regret. This sensitivity is not weakness, it is intelligence refined through attention and self-respect. Relationships also shift when inner order is present. You stop seeking others to fill emotional gaps you have not addressed yourself. You bring steadiness instead of expectation. Boundaries become natural, not defensive. Conflict becomes navigable because your inner state is not chaotic. You respond rather than react. Inner order also affects how you experience uncertainty. Life will always contain change, loss, ambiguity. But when your inner world is ordered, uncertainty does not destabilize you completely. You remain grounded even when answers are not immediate. This groundedness creates resilience that cannot be manufactured through motivation alone. As inner order deepens, you begin to trust your capacity to handle what arises. This trust reduces anxiety. You no longer feel the need to control everything because you know you can respond responsibly. This shift changes how life feels on a daily level. There is more space, more patience, more clarity. Outer stability grows quietly from this foundation, not as perfection but as coherence. Work becomes more focused, relationships more balanced, health more sustainable. Even when challenges arise, they no longer feel like threats to your identity. Inner order is not about becoming someone else. It is about becoming aligned with yourself. When this alignment exists, life begins to move with you rather than against you. From this alignment, a deeper understanding emerges, one that restores personal power by placing responsibility where it truly belongs. Responsibility restores personal power in a way that nothing else can. Not power over circumstances, not power over other people, but power of your own inner position in life. This is the kind of power that does not fluctuate with approval, success, or failure. It is steady because it is rooted in ownership. Many people misunderstand responsibility as self-blame. They hear the word and immediately think of pressure, guilt, or harsh judgment. But true responsibility is not punishment. It is clarity. It is the recognition that while you may not control everything that happens to you, you do influence how it shapes you. This influence is subtle, but it is real. When responsibility is avoided, life feels unfair and exhausting. You wait for conditions to improve before you allow yourself peace. You wait for others to change before you feel respected. You wait for motivation to arrive before you act with discipline. In this waiting, personal power slowly erodes. You become reactive, dependent on forces outside yourself. Responsibility changes this dynamic quietly. It begins when you stop asking, "Why did this happen to me?" and start asking, "How will I respond to this?" This question does not deny pain. It does not excuse harm. It simply brings the focus back to where movement is possible, to your choices, your boundaries, your habits, your inner posture. When you take responsibility for your inner state, you stop outsourcing regulation to the world. You no longer expect situations, people, or achievements to stabilize your emotions for you. This does not make you cold or detached. It makes you grounded. You become someone who can experience life deeply without being consumed by it. Responsibility strengthens self-trust. Each time you act in alignment with your values, even when it is uncomfortable, you reinforce the belief that you can rely on yourself. This belief is powerful. It reduces anxiety because you are no longer afraid of your own reactions. You know you will meet difficulty with integrity. This also changes how you relate to mistakes. Instead of collapsing into shame or defensiveness, you examine what happened with honesty. You correct course without self-hatred. Growth becomes possible because energy is no longer wasted on denial or blame. In relationships, responsibility restores balance. You stop demanding that others fill emotional gaps you have not addressed within yourself. You communicate more clearly. You listen more fully. You own your reactions instead of projecting them. This creates respect both for yourself and from others. Responsibility also brings a quiet sense of dignity. You move through life with less resentment because you are no longer constantly negotiating your self-respect. You do what needs to be done, even when no one sees it. This builds an inner strength that does not seek recognition. Personal power does not announce itself. It is felt in calm responses, steady habits, and consistent values. It is the power to remain aligned under pressure, to stay present when emotions rise, to choose long-term integrity over short-term relief. As this power stabilizes, something else becomes possible. The need for constant noise fades. The mind begins to seek stillness, not as escape, but as nourishment. And in that stillness, a deeper guidance starts to reveal itself. Silence reveals truthful direction, not because silence gives answers, but because it removes what has been drowning them out. Most people are not lost because they lack intelligence or opportunity. They are lost because their inner world is constantly noisy. Opinions, expectations, fears, comparisons, and unfinished emotions all speak at once. In this noise, even the clearest inner signals become impossible to hear. Silence is not the absence of sound. It is the absence of unnecessary movement within the mind. It is the state in which attention is no longer being pulled in every direction. When the mind settles into silence, the nervous system relaxes, breathing deepens, thought slows. What remains is not emptiness, but clarity. Many avoid silence because it initially feels uncomfortable. When external stimulation is removed, unresolved thoughts and emotions rise to the surface. This can feel unsettling, but what rises is not there to harm you, it is there to be acknowledged. Silence brings honesty. It shows you what has been waiting for your attention. As you sit with silence, you begin to notice patterns. Certain thoughts repeat, certain concerns carry emotional weight, certain directions feel heavy, while others feel quietly alive. This sensing is not logical analysis. It is intuition refined through stillness. It does not shout, it whispers. Truthful direction rarely arrives as certainty. It arrives as resonance, a sense of alignment, a feeling of rightness that does not require justification. This is why silence is essential. Noise demands explanation. Silence allows recognition. In silence, urgency dissolves. You stop rushing toward answers. You stop forcing decisions out of anxiety. Instead, you allow understanding to unfold at its own pace. This patience prevents many mistakes that are made not from lack of intelligence, but from inner pressure. Silence also teaches restraint. When you are comfortable with stillness, you no longer need constant stimulation to feel alive. You become less reactive, less impulsive, more present. This presence affects how you speak, how you listen, how you choose. Direction shaped by silence is grounded. It does not seek validation. It does not compete for attention. It feels stable because it is connected to your values rather than your fears. Even when the path is uncertain, there is a quiet confidence in taking the next step. As silence becomes a regular practice, the mind learns to rest, and a rested mind is a clear mind. From this clarity, choices become simpler. Priorities reorganize themselves. You naturally move toward what sustains you and away from what drains you. This is how the future is designed, with intention rather than accident. Not through force, but through awareness. Not through noise, but through stillness. When silence becomes familiar, guidance becomes continuous, and life begins to feel less like something you are chasing and more like something you are consciously shaping moment by moment.